I was sitting at my apartment, surrounded by boxes of wedding things that would never be used, cream-colored invitations, still wrapped in plastic, a seating chart leaning against the wall, unopened gifts stacked like quiet accusations in the corner. Strangely, I didn't feel panic. I felt relief, the kind that settles into your chest after you finally stop holding your breath. 2 weeks ago, I thought I was planning a wedding. Tonight, I'm unpacking the truth. It started at a dinner table under warm lights and polite smiles. My fiancé, the man I was supposed to marry, clinked his glass halfway through the meal and announced calmly, confidently, like he'd rehearsed it in his head, "I've decided we need a prenup. Everything stays separate." I remember the way my fork froze midair, the way the room went too quiet, like even the walls were listening. His parents watched me carefully, waiting to see how I'd react. I smiled. "Perfect timing," I said. They didn't know what that smile meant yet. They didn't know that the night before, I had already withdrawn my name from the house deposit we'd just made together. They didn't know that the $50,000 I had transferred, money I'd saved for years, was already back in my account. I let them talk. I let him explain how separate finances were cleaner, smarter, safer. What's mine is mine. What's yours is yours. And then, when the logic finally trapped him in his own words, I told them. Dead silence. His mother's face drained of color. His father leaned forward like he could still control the situation. My fiancé's confidence collapsed into something brittle and desperate as he realized what his perfectly reasonable request had just cost him. That dinner wasn't the end of our engagement. It was the moment the mask slipped. Because later, after the accusations, the threats, the crying, I found out the truth. From a mutual friend, a careless confession made over drinks. He'd been bragging about how clever his prenup plan was, about how he'd get me to pay for most of the house while protecting his family's money, about how I was, in his words, a wallet with a ring. So yes, I smiled at that dinner, because wallets can close, and this one did. Before that dinner, before the prenup, before the house, the money, the silence at the table. There was us, or at least the version of us I believed in. I met him 3 years ago, in a way that felt unremarkable at the time, but slowly rewrote my entire routine. A mutual friends gathering, too much noise, cheap wine. We ended up on the balcony, talking over the city lights like everyone else inside didn't exist. He was charming, in a restrained way. Not loud, not performative. The kind of man who listened just enough to make you feel chosen. He told me about his work in fashion and marketing, how creative it felt compared to his friends' corporate jobs. I told him about my career in software engineering, the long hours, the quiet satisfaction of solving problems no one else wanted to touch. He laughed and said we balanced each other out. I liked that. I liked the idea of balance. Dating him felt easy at first. He was attentive in public, affectionate in private. He remembered small details, how I took my coffee, which songs I skipped, the fact that I hated surprise parties. When he talked about the future, it sounded inclusive. We, us, together. After a year, we moved in together. That's when the math quietly entered the relationship. I made more. Not astronomically more, but enough that it mattered. I noticed it in small ways first. I covered dinners without discussion, paid for weekend trips when he said, "We can do something cheaper if you want," while already looking relieved. When the rent came up, he suggested splitting proportionally, so it's fair. I agreed. It was fair. At least that's what I told myself. His parents were always present, not intrusive, strategic. His mother liked to frame everything as concern. We just want what's best for him. His father spoke in calm, authoritative sentences, like every conversation was a negotiation. I thought it was cultural, family-oriented, normal. When he proposed 6 months ago, it felt right. Intimate, no spectacle, just the ring, his hands slightly unsteady, his voice softer than usual. I said yes without hesitation. Wedding planning started immediately. Venues, guest lists, budgets. He wanted something elegant, but not over the top. I noticed I was the one tracking deposits, calling vendors, making spreadsheets. He'd say, "You're just better at this stuff." I thought that was trust. House hunting came next, our first big purchase. We toured places for months. I imagined hosting holidays, painting walls, building something permanent. When we found the house, good bones, great neighborhood, it felt like a win. The numbers were discussed openly. I'd cover 50,000. He'd put in 34, mostly from his parents' gift. Ownership would be proportional. 60-40, it made sense. Everything was agreed on, signed, scheduled. So when he announced the prenup at that dinner, it didn't feel like a precaution. It felt like a reveal. Looking back, the warning signs weren't loud. They never are. They came disguised as jokes, as reasonable suggestions, as moments I brushed aside because love, at the time, felt sturdier than suspicion. It started with language. Not our bills, my bills, not we can afford it, you've got this. Whenever something expensive came up, his eyes would flick to me automatically, like my income was a safety net he didn't even realize he was standing on. I told myself it was unconscious, that he trusted me. That partnership meant stepping in when the other person leaned, but leaning slowly turned into resting. When we talked about the house, he grew oddly relaxed the moment I confirmed I'd handle the larger part of the deposit. Not grateful, comfortable. His parents, too. His mother started referring to it as the house you're buying together, while his father talked about appreciation and long-term value, always careful to say his son's future instead of our future. I noticed how often money conversations ended with reassurance aimed at him. You won't be stuck if anything happens, his father said once, swirling his wine. You'll always have your independence, his mother added, smiling at him like this was the highest form of love. No one asked what I needed protection from. There were moments when the imbalance brushed against me hard enough to feel uncomfortable, like when he planned a vacation he couldn't afford, then looked at me expectantly when it came time to book flights, or when he joked, half laughing, half testing, "What's the point of having a girlfriend who makes good money if she doesn't spend it?" I laughed back. Told myself he didn't mean it. That couples tease. That stress brings out stupid comments. The prenup conversation didn't come out of nowhere either. He'd mentioned friends' divorces in passing. How messy they were. How unfair. How men got destroyed financially. I'd nod, sympathetic, thinking he meant in general. Thinking he was talking about hypothetical risks, not me. What I didn't know then, what I would learn later, was that he'd been discussing this with his parents for weeks. Strategizing, running numbers, framing it as maturity, as responsibility, as him being smart. All while I was transferring $50,000 into escrow. All while I was picturing paint colors and dinner parties and a life built together. The night before the dinner, something in me hesitated, just for a second. I stared at my banking app longer than usual after confirming the transfer. A quiet, uncomfortable thought pressed in. What if this isn't as mutual as I think? I ignored it, but that question followed me into the dining room the next night, sat with us, listened carefully, and when he raised his glass and said, "Everything stays separate," it finally had its answer. The moment he clinked his glass, I knew something was wrong, not because of what he said, but because of how prepared he sounded. Calm, polished, like this wasn't a discussion, but a decision already finalized somewhere I hadn't been invited. "So," he said, smiling as if this were a toast, "I've been thinking about our future, and I've decided we need a prenup. Everything stays separate. What's mine is mine. What's yours is yours." The words landed neatly on the table between the plates and wine glasses, sharp and deliberate. I set my fork down slowly, not dramatically, just enough to give myself a second to breathe. "Okay," I said, "let's talk about it." His father didn't wait. "Smart move," he said, nodding approvingly. "No offense, but protecting assets is just good business." "No offense," as if this were a compliment. I nodded back. I understand the concept. My fiancé smiled at me, the smile he used when he thought he was winning. "I knew you would. You're logical." Logical, not loved, not trusted, logical. He continued, warming to the topic. "Separate finances, separate taxes, clean lines. And if anything happened, God forbid, we'd each walk away with what we brought in." "And the house?" I asked. "Well," he said, pausing just long enough to seem thoughtful, "the house would still be joint. We're both on the deed. Once we're married, it's marital property, 50-50. I looked at him, really looked. "So," I said carefully, "you want separation when it protects you, and joint ownership when it benefits you." His parents shifted in their seats. His mother's smile tightened. "When did you decide this?" I asked. "Oh, weeks ago," he said lightly. "After Becca's divorce. I just want to avoid that kind of mess." Weeks. Weeks while I was saving, planning, transferring money, believing we were aligned. I reached for my phone. "This is actually perfect timing," I said. His brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" Well, I said, unlocking my screen, since you want everything separate, I went ahead and withdrew my name from the house purchase yesterday. The room went silent. His mother spoke first. Withdrew? I called escrow, I said. Explained I was no longer proceeding. Since your son hadn't deposited his portion yet, and we're not married, I was able to pull my funds. The $50,000 is back in my account. His face drained of color. You can't do that. I did, I said, and turned my phone so they could see the confirmation email. His father's voice sharpened. But we already transferred the money to him. Then he can proceed on his own, I said. His credit, his funds, his house, clean and simple, right? I can't get approved for a $420,000 loan on my salary, he snapped, panic bleeding through. Then find a cheaper house. But we signed. You signed, I corrected. I formally withdrew. You have 72 hours to complete the deposit, or you lose the house and the $5,000 earnest money. His mother stood abruptly. This is manipulation. No, I said calmly. This is exactly what your son asked for. Separate finances. He started doing the math out loud. Desperate, fast. I need your 50. But what's mine is mine, I said softly. What's yours is yours. The table exploded. Accusations, raised voices, threats, tears. His mother called me selfish. His father hinted at legal action. My fiancé cried about his dream house collapsing. I stood. Thanks for dinner, I said. Let me know what you decide. You've got about 68 hours. I left them there, and as I drove home, my phone started vibrating nonstop. I didn't answer a single message. I didn't read the messages that night. 39 texts in under an hour. Missed calls stacked on my screen like evidence I wasn't ready to process. I put my phone face down on the kitchen counter and leaned against it, palms flat, breathing slowly until my heartbeat stopped racing. Relief came first, then anger, then something colder, clarity. I walked through the apartment, noticing things I hadn't seen clearly before. The framed engagement photo on the shelf. The suit bag hanging untouched in the closet. The spreadsheet on my laptop still open to wedding expenses I had mostly been tracking alone. I closed it without saving. When I finally checked my phone, the tone had shifted from outrage to pleading. You blindsided me. My parents are furious. We can fix this. You embarrassed me. Not I hurt you. Not I understand. The next morning, I woke up to the first voicemail from his mother. Her voice was tight with controlled indignation. She talked about respect, about family, about how I'd handled things poorly. She never mentioned the prenup, never mentioned the imbalance, just the humiliation, his humiliation. By afternoon, his father had escalated. He showed up at my office building. Security called me down before he even made it past the lobby. I watched through the glass as he paced, jaw clenched, rehearsing authority, like it had always worked before. You cost us $35,000, he said the moment he saw me. The gift and the earnest money. I cost you nothing, I replied. I withdrew from a purchase before marriage. That's my right. You knew he couldn't afford it alone. Then maybe he shouldn't have demanded separate finances. He leaned in, lowering his voice. This isn't what he meant. It's exactly what he said. I showed him the text. The words were still there. Clean, simple, undeniable. He tried to grab my phone. Security intervened. He was escorted out. That night, a mutual friend called, hesitant, awkward. I didn't think you knew, she said, but he's been bragging about the prenup, about how smart it was, about getting you to pay for most of the house while protecting his family's money. She paused. He called you a wallet with a ring. Something settled inside me when she said it. Not heartbreak, recognition. The next day, his friend Jade reached out, asking to meet. We sat across from each other at a coffee shop, steam rising between us like a truce neither of us believed in. He's willing to compromise, she said carefully. How? A prenup, she said, but the house stays joint. I laughed before I could stop myself. That's not a compromise, I said. That's exactly what he wanted. She frowned. He's giving up things. Like what? She hesitated. Streaming accounts. I stared at her. He wants $50,000 for a house, but he's offering Netflix? You're being unreasonable. No, I said. I'm being consistent. Her face flushed when I repeated the phrase, wallet with a ring. She didn't deny it. Just muttered something about jokes taken out of context. They weren't jokes. They were plans. And now the plan was unraveling. By midweek, everything had spilled out of private conversations and into public view. He went first. Not with facts, with a narrative. A post about betrayal, about how his dream home had been taken by someone who couldn't handle a strong, independent man protecting himself, about how money reveals people's true nature, about trust collapsing overnight. He never mentioned the prenup, never mentioned asking for separate finances while expecting joint ownership, never mentioned who was paying what. The comments didn't follow the script he expected. Wait, didn't you want a prenup but also wanted her to pay more? Separate finances but joint property? That doesn't add up. Didn't you say she was covering most of the down payment? Then one of his coworkers commented publicly, "Didn't you say you were getting her to pay for most of it?" The post was deleted within 2 hours. That afternoon, his parents reached out again. They wanted to resolve this like adults. I refused to go back to their house, but agreed to meet at a neutral restaurant. When I arrived, he was already there, seated stiffly between them. His father came prepared. Charts, printed numbers, a proposal laid out like a business pitch. "Here's what we think is fair," he said. "You put in 50,000. We contribute 30. Ownership is 50-50. I looked at the papers, then at them. "So I pay 62%, I said calmly, "and own half." "It's about building a future together," his mother added softly, "with separate finances." "As he demanded," I said. She reached for my hand. "Don't you love him?" I pulled back. "I wanted a partner," I said. He wanted a wallet. That was when he finally lost control. "You humiliated me," he snapped. "Everyone knows you pulled out of the house." "You humiliated yourself," I replied. "You ambushed me with a prenup in front of your parents." "It was for protection." "Your protection," I said, "while using my money." "That money means nothing to you," he shot back. The room went still. "That money," I said quietly, "is 3 years of saving, no vacations, living below my means. But to you, it's nothing, because you don't earn it." His father tried another angle. "What if we paid you back over time?" "Paid me back for what?" I asked. "I never gave you anything." They left angry, offended, certain I was the problem. On Friday, a formal letter arrived from a lawyer. He was demanding 50,000 for detrimental reliance and breach of promise. I hired my own attorney. He laughed, actually laughed, before responding. No money had changed hands between us. I withdrew before marriage. The text messages proved he demanded separate finances. Expecting someone to fund a house while insisting on financial separation was not reasonable reliance. We never heard from that lawyer again. That should have been the end of it. Instead, he shifted tactics. Suddenly, I was financially abusive. He told people I'd manipulated him into losing his dream house. Friends I barely knew, his book club circle, yoga acquaintances, even his hairdresser, started messaging me about doing the right thing. My response never changed. He wanted separate finances. He got them. Then he made his worst mistake. He went to my mother. My mother called me that evening. Her voice was calm, too calm. The kind of calm that only comes after someone has already shown their hand and lost. "He came to see me today," she said. I closed my eyes and leaned back against the couch. For a moment, the apartment felt smaller, the silence heavier. He had arrived at her house with a performance prepared, tearful but controlled, wounded but careful not to look unstable. He told her he'd been blindsided, that he loved me, that he never meant for things to go this far, that he only wanted to protect himself while building a future with me. "With your money," my mother added dryly. She let him talk. She always did. She listened the way someone listens when they already know the ending. "He said," she continued, "that he just wanted to be safe, financially, that everything got misunderstood." "And?" I asked. "And I asked him why protection only mattered when it was about him," she said. "Why separation was non-negotiable for you, but joint ownership was essential for him." I could picture it, the pause, the blank look, the scramble for words that never quite arrive. "He didn't have an answer," she said. "He just kept repeating that he loved you." Love. As if love existed in isolation from actions. After we hung up, the weight finally hit me. Not the house, not the money, the years. Every moment I'd swallowed discomfort because it felt easier than confrontation. Every time I'd paid without asking questions because I thought generosity meant commitment. Every joke I'd brushed off because it didn't feel worth a fight. I replayed conversations in my head. "You're better at handling finances. You've got this. It's not a big deal to you." I had mistaken convenience for compatibility. That night, his message came through. "Found another house. Smaller. 250. Less pressure. You put down 30. I'll do 20. Fresh start." I stared at the screen for a long time. My hands didn't shake this time. My chest didn't tighten. There was no panic, only a quiet, irreversible knowing. "We're not together anymore," I typed. The 3 dots appeared. Vanished, appeared again. "You're ending everything over one fight?" I didn't respond. An hour later, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find him standing there, with his parents behind him, and a woman I didn't recognize holding a folder. A realtor, printed listings in hand, smiles stretched too tight, acting like reality was something that could still be negotiated if they pushed hard enough. "We can tour tomorrow," he said, like nothing had happened. Something inside me snapped cleanly. "The wedding is off," I said. His mother gasped. His father raised his voice. He just stared at me, stunned, like this outcome had never been possible in his mind. "You're throwing everything away," he said, his voice cracking. "No," I replied quietly. "I'm finally seeing it." They left in chaos, raised voices echoing down the hallway, doors slamming, neighbors watching. Later that night, building management emailed me about the disturbance. I sent them the security footage. By morning, a formal trespass warning had been issued. I sat on the floor after they were gone, surrounded by unopened wedding boxes, and felt the hollow space where denial used to live. This wasn't the worst moment. It was just the moment I stopped pretending it wasn't already broken. The silence after they left was different. Not raw, not frantic, settled. I cleaned the apartment that night, not because it was messy, but because I needed motion. I folded things that didn't need folding. Threw away wedding brochures without rereading them, placed the engagement ring in its box, and slid it into a drawer, not angrily, not ceremonially, just done. The next morning, reality started answering back. He lost the house. He couldn't get approved for the loan on his salary, not at 420, not even close. He tried multiple banks, mortgage brokers, even short-term lenders with brutal terms. The best approval he got was barely half of what he needed. The earnest money was gone. $5,000 evaporated in less than a week. His parents were furious. At me, of course. Never at him. Never at the decisions he'd made or the plan he'd tried to execute. Just at the person who had refused to play along. Then the tax situation surfaced. The $30,000 his parents had gifted him hadn't gone toward a house. No purchase, no closing, no paper trail to justify the intent, which meant it triggered consequences they hadn't planned for. Gift tax obligations, penalties, paperwork, stress. Their help ended up costing them more than it ever should have. He moved back in with them. Lost his apartment because he'd already given notice, confident we'd be moving. He started posting about resilience, about healing, about rising above toxic relationships. The captions were vague enough to invite sympathy without accountability. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet. I didn't defend myself online, didn't counter his narrative, didn't post receipts. I didn't need to. People started asking questions on their own. A mutual friend sent me a screenshot of his dating profile, looking for a real man who isn't threatened by success. Must be financially stable and generous. Another friend told me about his dates, how conversations stalled the moment he mentioned wanting a prenup, but still expected the man to cover dinners, trips, expenses. One guy apparently told him, flat out, "You want a sponsor, not a partner." That comment traveled. Jade, the same friend who'd tried to negotiate on his behalf, reached out again, this time to apologize. She admitted she hadn't known about the wallet with a ring comment until after everything collapsed, admitted that he'd been planning the prenup strategy for months. Get the house first, protect his upside later. Hearing it confirmed didn't hurt. It clarified. I met my mother for lunch that week. She listened as I told her everything, not the logistics, but the realization, the shift, the way clarity feels less like empowerment and more like calm. She nodded. He wanted a donor, she said, not a partner. That was the moment I stopped framing what happened as a breakup. It was an exit. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It came in waves, smaller, pettier, more revealing than the original explosion. The first was the wedding venue. He tried to keep it, not because he planned to get married, because he thought holding onto the deposits might pressure me into coming back. He sent me an invoice for my half of the payments, $8,000, typed confidently, like entitlement was still a shared language between us. I replied with screenshots. His own messages, everything separate, clean and simple. The deposits were lost, $16,000 gone. His parents had paid them after the house collapsed, convinced reconciliation was inevitable. It wasn't. Then came the ring. He demanded to keep it, said I'd humiliated him publicly and deserved to lose it, framed it as compensation, as justice, as something he was owed. The law didn't agree. Where we lived, engagement rings were conditional gifts. The condition, marriage, was never met. The ring legally belonged to the giver. He refused to return it. I hired my lawyer again. Papers were sent. Deadlines were set. He stalled. When the ring finally came back, something felt off. I had it appraised. The diamond had been swapped for a fake. Not well done, not cleverly, sloppy, panicked. My lawyer contacted his parents. I outlined the options: return the original diamond immediately or face charges for theft. It was back within 24 hours. After that, the noise faded. His parents stopped calling. The friends stopped messaging. The sympathy well dried up as the pattern became impossible to ignore. The same phrases repeated in every story he told. The same missing accountability. He was living with his parents. No house, no engagement, no narrative that held up under scrutiny. I invested the $50,000 instead of letting it sit. Within months, it was already growing. Quietly, productively, without drama. Someone asked me if I regretted how I handled it. I didn't. My only regret was how long I ignored the signs. The entitlement wasn't new. It had always been there, hidden behind jokes, softened by affection, justified by love. The way he'd say, "You've got this," whenever a bill appeared. The way he planned expensive trips and looked at me expectantly. The way he once said, without irony, "What's the point of dating someone who makes good money if they don't spend it?" I'd laughed then. I wasn't laughing now. He wanted my wallet, not my name, my money, not my problems, my assets, not my liabilities. He wanted what's mine is mine, and what's yours is ours. Instead, he got exactly what he asked for: complete financial independence from me. The quiet afterward was real, not the stunned quiet of loss, the earned quiet of alignment. I took the ring, after it was returned, verified, whole, and placed it in its box one last time before handing it back through my lawyer. No speech, no message attached, just closure, clean and final. I didn't rush into anything new. Dating wasn't even a thought. What mattered was noticing how much lighter my days felt without constant calculation, without wondering if generosity would be mistaken for obligation, or if love would be measured in dollar signs. I put the money I'd saved and protected into investments, watched it grow steadily, quietly. No drama, no negotiations, no entitlement attached. People eventually stopped asking questions. The story stopped circulating. New distractions replaced old gossip. But the lesson stayed. I learned that love doesn't require me to subsidize someone else's comfort. That partnership isn't proportional to income, it's proportional to integrity. That separate finances means exactly that, not separation when convenient and togetherness when profitable. I learned that entitlement doesn't announce itself loudly at first. It shows up as jokes, as assumptions, as expectations disguised as affection. And most importantly, I learned that walking away isn't failure when the alternative is self-betrayal. My mother said it best, months later, over coffee. "He didn't want to build a life with you," she said. "He wanted to build one on you." I'm grateful I found out before vows, before shared debt, before children, before untangling a future that was never designed to be mutual. He asked for independence. I gave it to him. Forever. If you've ever found yourself questioning your instincts, if you've ever been told you were overreacting for asking for fairness, if you've ever confused love with sacrifice that only goes one way, this story is your reminder. Boundaries are not cruelty. Clarity is not betrayal. And walking away from someone who sees you as a resource instead of a partner is not loss, it's protection. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it resonated with you, or if you've lived through something similar, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Your experiences matter more than you think, and someone reading them might need that validation today. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you want more stories like this. Stories about reclaiming your power, trusting your instincts, and choosing yourself when it counts. I'll see you in the next video, and in the meantime, take care of yourself.